Welcome to the next episode of the Living Library podcast. This podcast is organized by the Haaf Family Arts Foundation, Inc., and the program as a whole is in collaboration with the Beverly Free Library in Beverly, New Jersey. It is in this podcast that we strive to answer the question, who's recording history happening right now? The Haaf Family Arts Foundation hopes to do this by bringing in notable people from the community to sit down and talk about their experiences growing up in our little city. We would like to start off by saying that we will not be censoring our guests during these talks, so viewer discretion and listener discretion is heavily advised. If you'd like to be present for one of our live tapings, they happen on the fourth Thursday of every month at 6:30 at the Beverly Free Library. Please take a look at our social media, Haaf, H-A-A-F, Family Arts, on Facebook and Instagram, to keep up to date on our latest projects. That being said, please enjoy the show. So, tonight we have with us Larry Williams. So without further ado, I will give the floor to him, and I will just be in the back in case there are any questions or any issues with time that we got to deal with. But other than that, the floor is now yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the Haaf Foundation, and thank you to each and every one of you that are here this evening. I don't know why you asked me to come, because I thought there was better qualified people than myself, but I am honored to be looked upon here in the city of Beverly. To start off, I wasn't born in Beverly. I was born in a little town called Belgrade, Florida. I came to Beverly when I was 4 years old. There's a movie that I'd like for some of you to watch. It's called Harvest of Shame. Harvest of Shame is about migrant workers that travel from Florida to New Jersey and Pennsylvania to work in the fields. That's what I was doing when I came here. I came to Freehold, New Jersey, and I was working in the potato field, and I was living in a barn, sleeping on hay. And my grandfather, who lived in Beverly, New Jersey, had just gotten married in March of 1951. He came to see me in Freehold, and his new bride, they had only been married 2 months, said she didn't want to see me living like that. At that time, I didn't know who my parents were. I was living from who could ever take care of me. And the ones that I was with at that time brought me, to New Jersey. So my grandfather brought me in, and his wife was the one that said, let him come live with us, Miss Ethel Williams. So at the age of 4, she had me there, and at the age of 5, she got another kid by the name of Wallace Williams. She adopted him. So she raised us as brothers at 214 Broad Street. Prior to my grandfather marrying Miss Ethel Williams, she had lost a child in childbirth. So she was definitely looking to be a mother. And she couldn't have any kids. So that's why she adopted Wallace and I. Bob Morani's mother, Miss Geraldine Harmon, became Wallace's godmother, and Anna Conway, who lived at 305 Broad Street, became my godmother. So we had, somebody was controlling us no matter where we went in the city. So as I said, I really didn't know who my parents were, and then I found out that my dad got killed when I was 7, and my mom died when I was 9. But I was living here in New Jersey. I started school at the Broad Street Elementary School there. I did a little research, and I think the schools here in Beverly integrated in 1947. So I started school there in 1951, so integration was already going on here, but it wasn't going on in the South. But in going to the school in Beverly, Mrs. Jeanette, Mr. Betor, Mrs. Keipel, and Mrs. Naylor always told me, Larry, I want you to read. And my grandfather was a reader. So I became a reader. Even after I left the elementary school and went up into the higher building, I think that's where the 5th graders were, 5th and 6th grade, I still would go back and get those books, and I would read. Well, I got in trouble at home. My grandfather told me, do not turn on the hot water, and I turned on the hot water, and Wallace stuck his hand in the hot water, and he got burned. Well, my grandfather wanted to chastise me, and I wasn't into being chastised. So I took off running. So I ran all over the city. In fact, across the street, there used to be McCluskey's buses. I stopped over there and I slept. And then at night, it got dark. I wanted to go close to home. So I went to sleep in this garage. And the police were looking for me. They only had one cop car, but they had 3 or 4 cops out looking for me. So they finally found me sleeping in the garage, and when they put the flashlight on me, I woke up and I started running. And the police had to really chase me down. And they said to my grandfather, said, Mr. Bill, said, we don't know what you did to him. I said, but that boy can run. So grandfather said, well, I'm going to take you back to Florida, which he did. That was in 1957. I went to school here until I got promoted out of the 4th grade going into the 5th. Well, when I went back to Florida, Florida schools were segregated. But I knew more as a child coming out of this school system than the kids that were in the 8th and 9th grade in the Florida school system. So during my time there, if a teacher called out sick, they would come and get me to teach the class. So I did that for 2 years. I did my 5th and 6th grade class, teaching when teachers call out. So when I got into high school, they put you in what they call the A class or the B class. So I was put in the A class. And I got put on the student council and the student patrol, and I eventually started playing football. And I did that until 1963 was my last year there. So I was a junior. My grandfather came to Florida, and at that time I was working in the fields. I mean, when we working in the fields, you make $3-4 a day, and that was it. My grandfather down there was driving a tractor every day, and he was making $1 an hour. So he would drive a truck on the weekend for 10 hours to make $50, which was really no money. But I came back here, and I went to school in Palmyra. Well, when I went to let Palmyra know that I was going to come to school there, I said, well, I'll only be here 2 hours. Palmyra said, no, you got to be here all day. I said, no, I got all my credits. Well, in Florida, I would have only had to go to school for 2 hours. The requirements was United States history and phys ed. When I came here, you had to do English, you had to do U.S. history, and a couple of other lectures. I was there all day long. So naturally, I chose shop, and in English, I was the most stupidest guy in the class because I had gotten that far behind. I mean, Beverly and Palmyra kids were up here, and I was here. We're in Florida. I was the guy that was up there. So we had to go and see Macbeth at McCarter Theater in Princeton. And I never did understand what the true meaning of Macbeth was. And I still don't know until this day. But Beverly gave me a head start. So with the grades that I had, Florida A&M gave me a scholarship. So I went back to Florida, and I went there for a year. But at that time, tuition was like $2,500 a year, and you got a granddad that's making $2,580. You couldn't go. So I came back home. So in the summer of '65, Jack Williams was the employer for Wall Rope, and my grandmother Ethel Williams was a shop steward there. So she asked Jack if Jack would give me a job. And Jack said yes. And I got hired at Wall Rope for $1.80 an hour. I was working the 12 to 8 shift, but they gave you plenty of overtime. And so I worked there, and then Wall Rope had a softball team. And the manager of that team was a guy by the name of Ike Foreman. So he asked me if I wanted to play. I said, sure. So I joined joined Wall Rope, and we went like 26-2 or something. We won the Burnton County Championship. But one of the things that I learned from Ike is that you have to do what you're told. We were playing a ball game at H.K. Porter in Riverside. And Ike told me when I went to the bat, I want you to hit the ball to the right side. Well, I knew that the Broughton County Times, if you hit a home run, they would put your name in the paper. I hit the ball over the left field fence. And when I ran around the base, he keep running your behind right to the end of the bench. And he left me there for 3 games. So I learned that regardless of what you do, we had a good outcome, but I didn't do what I was told. He said, I don't care if you made an out, as long as you did what I told you. So I started respecting him. So later on that summer, Wall Rope had a textile strike, and they were meeting in the firehouse on Broad Street, upstairs. And we had been in there for maybe 4 or 5 hours. I mean, just arguing. I mean, I didn't know anything about no union. I was just there. So the Dodgers were playing somebody on TV, and Ike Foreman got up, and he said, well, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to vote for this contract, and I'm leaving because the Dodgers are playing. When Ike spoke, everybody said, yeah. So that let me know the amount of power that he had. So shortly after that, by my not going back to college, I got a letter from Uncle Sam that said, greetings. But prior to that, I had went to the Naval Department, and I did everything but sign the papers. Then my recruiter was a guy by the name of Tony Hodges, who I would meet later in life. So when I got that greetings, I went back to see Tony. He says, I can't touch you now. You've got to go in the Army. Thomas Crawley got drafted in that draft. And Tyrone Schaefer, from all these were Beverly guys, Tyrone Schaefer volunteered for the Marines. Bob Morani volunteered for the Army. So they sent me to Fort Dix. So I'm over there for my first 8 weeks of training. Now every first Saturday of the month, every first Saturday of August, Beverly churches would go to Willow Grove Park. And I got a weekend pass, and I came here, and Mr. Marvin Barclay took me from Beverly to Willow Grove. All the buses were gone when I got here, but he went out of his way and took me to Willow Grove. So shortly after that, I got sent to Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, I was taking artillery training and missile training. And one of my captains said to me, he says, you know, you've got some high grades. He said, you should become an officer. I said, wow. I said, well, how long will I have to be in the military? He said, 2 years and 10 months. I said, oh, that's good. He said, no, but you don't understand. You're going to do 10 months of training, and then you're going to do 2 years of active duty. Now, with me being in the artillery, you would be with the infantry. You're the first one that Charlie's going to want to kill, because you can bring in, you know, the bombardment. So I said, no, I don't think I want to do that. So I went on, and I got shipped out to Vietnam on I think it was December 9th of '66, and I was at a unit called the 196 in Tay Ninh, and I was with the artillery that fired the first prep fire for an airborne jump since the Korean conflict, and we were on the Cambodian border. So later on, we moved from there to a place called Chu Lai, and I was out on a peninsula where we had to take boats to get into land. And during that time, Vice President Humphrey came to Vietnam, and my captain asked me if I would carry the guide arm for the 3rd 82nd Artillery. So I got a chance to carry the guide arm to flip it in front of the Vice President of the United States. I also met Senator Edwin Brock at that time, who was the first black senator that we had. So we left from Chu Lai, and I went to a place called Tam Key. Now when I got to Tam Key, I took a trip one day to Da Nang. As I'm walking into PX in Da Nang, there's Tyrone Schaefer. 2 Beverly boys on the other side of the world in the same place at the same time. So, you know, we got a chance to talk to each other. And then I went on up to the DMZ because we replaced the Marines. And I got out of there on like December 7th of 67. My unit was overrun on December 9th. So I missed that. Came back to Beverly and I spent some time here, and then they sent me to Fort Benning, Georgia. And I left Philadelphia on the train and I got to Atlanta. And at that time, a long distance phone call cost 10 cents. Well, I had dollar bills. So I asked the guy for change for $1. And he looked at me and says, and I got my uniform on with my medals, and he said, look at me, he says, this ain't no so-and-so change booth boy. And I said, wow, even with all of this, I'm still a boy. So anyhow, I went on over into Fort Benning, and I did my little 5 or 6 months there. Now, when I got there was another Beverly guy there, Bob Morani. And he used to scare me to death with his driving, you know, because we'd come back on the weekend. Bobby would do it in 13, 14 hours. I was scared to death. I'd be holding on. And this was before you had the seatbelts. So while I was there, I didn't want to go to the field because that was a training unit. So they said, well, you can go to school. So I started taking these classes, and I took a class called Project Transition, which was with the Postal Service. The only thing was you had to take the test there, and the first job that you can get, you had to apply in Atlanta, in the Georgia area, which I knew I wasn't going to stay in Georgia. But I took it anyway because I didn't want to go to the fields. So I asked for Beverly, New Jersey, Trenton, Camden, Georgia. Well, Georgia hired me. I wouldn't stay. Camden said, come there. I said, no. Philadelphia said, come there. I said, no. And Trenton came up. So I said, okay. And the last day that I was eligible, I called Trenton, and they said, yeah, we got a spot for you. So when I got up there, they were paying $2.95 an hour. UPS was paying $3.02 an hour. But before I took the job in Trenton, I was working at War Rope for it was $2.02 an hour. They had gotten a raise from $1.80. So when I got to Trenton, they said, well, we really don't have a job for you. And I said, look, I quit my job. They said, yeah, but we got a job that you're not going to want. I said, well, what is it? They said, custodian. I said, well, what does it pay? He says, $2.40 an hour. You think I ain't gonna want $2.40? I'm making $2.02. So I grabbed the broom and I pushed the broom for about a week. And then they came to me and they said, Larry, we're gonna send you home and you come back next week and you'll be a letter carrier at $2.95. So I stayed there from like November until February. And a young man by the name of Fred Perry from Florence told me about Willingboro. He said, man, they're hiring in Willingboro. I said, yeah. So he says, yeah. He says, I got hired. So I said, well, look, I'm going to go and ask. So I came and I saw the postmaster. His name was Ed Haig. And he said to me, he said, are you Larry Williams, the baseball player? I said, yeah. He said, would you play baseball for the American Legion? I said, sure. He said, you got the job. So when I went back to Trenton and I told them that I was transferring, they said, we're not going to let anybody else transfer after you because we trained them and the other officers take them. So I came to Willingboro and I played baseball for the American Legion for a year. And then, you get a big head. I quit. So while I was there was a guy by the name of Al Lowe who was the clerk's president of their union. And he said to me, he said, now, I'm still living in Beverly now. He said to me, he says, you seem to be a pretty smart guy. Why don't you join the union? I said, well, I belong. He said, no, why don't you get a position in the union? I said, well, look, I'm not really interested. He said, do you realize that the benefits that you're getting, somebody else fought for those benefits? And I said, yeah. He said, well, you need to do it. So anyhow, I joined. And I ran for vice president, and I won. Well, when you know it, as soon as I win, the president gets sick, which means that everything falls down on me. So I did that for almost 3 years. I ran the union. So one day he said to me, he says, when are you going to run for the presidency? I said, I'm not. As long as you, he said, look, I'm going to nominate you. And if I nominate you, you got it. So he nominated me and I became president of the local union in Willingboro. And during that time, 1970, I think it was, we had the post office. That's when the post office department ceased under President Nixon. We became the United States Postal Service. And during that time, as a union official, we were the first ones to be arrested because we had no strike. There was no strike against the United States government. So all of us, we took a risk, but you know, the risk paid off. So anyhow, so I did that for maybe 20 years. During that time, there was a struggle between blacks and whites for power in the union. The blacks within the power of our union told me, hey man, we got your back. Run for state office. And at that time I had my afro and had my dashiki, I was into my blackness, and I said, okay. So the national called me in, they said, we don't want you to run. So if you run, we're gonna bury you. I said, well, you just gotta bury me. They buried me. But anyhow, I was still winning grievances. And about 2 years later, they called me, they said, we need you to run for a business agent. So we're gonna make you a regional administrative business agent. And you're gonna work with an Irish guy by the name of Jack O'Shea. So when I got to working with Jack told me, he says, well, I'm gonna retire in a year. I'm gonna recommend that you take the position. So I became the first black business agent for New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. During that time, Brian's mother was living, and they had just opened up Atlantic City. And we were down in Atlantic City with Jack and his wife and my wife, and the women were walking in front of Jack and I. We were talking. So two ladies of the night came to me and Jack and said, wow, you guys want some company? And I said to them, I said, hey man, we don't need no company. We just picked them two up. And they said, well, y'all ain't doing too good. But my wife, she wanted to kill me. So anyhow, I came back to Beverly, and Stonewall Jackson had a softball team called Stonewall Inn. They wore green uniforms. And I used to go down to Delaware to watch them play. I never played with them, but I would go and watch them play. So then Beverly AC started their team. Well, Beverly AC was a private club. And when I mean private, they were private. But they had a kid named Carlton Anthony that played left field for them. He was a black kid. But he still didn't have the privileges that they had. So Leroy McGee, which was my uncle, Marvin Schaefer, John Merritt, and Stonewall started the Royal Club. Now, the younger guys on Beverly AC, we always played together. We went to school together, so we had a different philosophy. But the older heads were not into that. So when we would play each other, there would be blacks on the third base side, whites on the right field side. And I mean, we would go at it. Now, those two teams were the best teams in Burlington County.
Yes, they were.
Beverly AC and the Royal Club. So we got to the point that we would merge our teams and go into tournaments and win tournaments all over New Jersey. Now the Royal Club, one year we went 56-2. And we played from Maryland to Connecticut. We played a schedule. And Marty Donahue, God bless his soul, he just passed a couple of months ago. Marty was our manager when we would go off. A lot of the Philadelphia Philly ball players, Bobby File and all of those guys play here in Beverly. So at that time, I wasn't with the Royal Club. I was playing with Mount Holly Rec out of Mount Holly. And we played the Royal Club, and I was the pitcher for the rec team, and we beat the Royal Club. So I came down to the club that night after we beat them, and Dick Anthony said to the guys in there, they had their heads down and everything, he ain't gonna do nothing but talk shit about how he beat y'all. So I said, no, I don't want to do that. I said, I'll come down here to join you. So that's when I joined the Royal Club, and I became their pitcher, because at that time, slow pitch was an art. You had to know how to throw the arc and make it drop right behind the plate. Now, prior to that time, I had played with Wall Rope. They had a team called Cramps with Woody Comedies, Jada Comedies, Ralph Scorninci. Those were the guys that learned me the game. Because coming from Florida, we played baseball. We didn't play no softball. So after that, Royal Club, went on and did their thing. So later on, in 1986, I was walking down the boardwalk, and I was still living in Beverly. And the Secretary-Treasurer of the union said to me, he says, Larry, he said, can you go and speak for us? I said, what do you mean speak for us? He said, I was speaker for the convention, can't make it. And we have nobody. We had 12,000 members in the hall. At that time, that was the largest AFL-CIO convention. And they said, just talk for 15 minutes. I said, okay. So I go out and I start talking. I'm looking back at the national president, and he's saying, I talked for an hour and a half, ain't said nothing. But what they know. I mean, they're jumping up, clapping and shouting, and he keep going. So the next day, as I'm walking down the boardwalk again, the Secretary-Treasurer said, Larry, he said, you didn't come by the office. I said, what am I coming by the office for? He said, your check. I said, what check? He said, you get $5,000 from that bench. Y'all want me to talk more? So anyhow, later on, Bryant's mother died, and I had to cut back on what I was doing. So if you guys remember Ed Lee, who used to be the postmaster here in Beverly, he was a black postmaster. Well, Ed Lee was the head of the postmasters organization, and I was the head of the carriers organization. So he and I were co-partners in a new program that the Postal Service had called, it was called Employee Involvement. Now, if you see the mail trucks today, when they park, you'll notice how they turn their wheels in or out. That was a program that Ed and I put together. We had so many rollaways where our trucks were killing kids all across the country that we put that into place, and the Postal Service sent us around the country to take care of that, And later on, my grandfather would always say, he'd read the paper and he'll see where Larry Williams said this and Larry Williams said that. So he said to one of his friends one day, I don't know why my grandson's always running his mouth. He's not the top dog. Well, if any of you remember the Cove Caterers out in Edgewater Park, I invited him and my grandmother to a dinner that they had at the Cove Caterers. And everybody was sitting at the tables, and had chairs at the head table. And all the officers came in, and then they said, well, now will everybody rise as our president comes in? Now the national president was there too. So when I walked in and I took my seat on the dais, later on that night, my grandfather said to me, he said, you never told me that you were in charge of everything. I said, Grandfather, I just wanted you to be proud of me. And I'll tell anybody, regardless of what your child does, be proud of him. Whatever you're going to be, do the best that you can do, and I'm so proud of you. So after that, he was walking around with my plaques and all of that stuff, and he was very happy. But my thoughts and my philosophy came from some giants here in Beverly. People like Thurman DeShields, who was a black businessman that had a car wash, that anytime we kids wanted to make a few dollars, he would find a lawn or something for us to do. Talbot Hall, who owned a bus company, Mitchell Poe, who was a barber, the Centennial brothers, who had a grocery store, John Sherwood, who had a store, that everybody from Beverly, we didn't have Acme and A&P and all of that stuff then. We bought from those stores, Keipel store, where we would catch the school bus from, during the day. And those type of guys. And then I met Mayor Frank Costello. And the Burlington Community Action Program was just getting started. And Frank said to me one day, he says, we need to do something with these kids. We need to get them off the street. So they came up with the basketball program. And we would have basketball where the kids are playing at now. And Darrell Anthony, Joe Stevens, Lou Harper, Nate Irvin, Greg Jones, Talbot Hall, all of those kids came through that program and became stars in Palmyra or whatever schools that they went to because of the time that that we spent with them. Mr. Jackson, Stonewall's father, Mr. Coach Jackson, I would love to sit on the porch with him and talk about baseball because he played with the Elite Giants, which was in the Negro League. He batted against Satchel Paige and Josh Gibson. So I would sit there and my head would just be blown away, talking to him. But the guy who meant the most to me, was Bill Gaines. Mr. Bill Gaines would go down to that park after working in the foundry all day. He'd be in the park with a flashlight cutting grass. He would take his saw, come out and build seesaws and swing so that we kids in Beverly would have something to do. He introduced me to the YMCA, where we would go out to Camp Occonequid out in Medford. Mr. Bill Gaines and Mr. Allen James was the scoutmaster. My brother Wallace got a chance to go to the jamborees out west there because of the work that he did. And Wallace became an explorer scout from Beverly. So we had some giants. My grandfather he was the first black restaurant owner. He owned Bill's Cafe that was at 214 Broad Street. And St. James Church, which was called Calvary Baptist. It was St. James at the time. If you go down in that basement, him, Deacon Whitaker, and Mr. Abner Cunningham dug the basement of the church. And they took the dirt out by wheelbarrow. After they did that, and they built the whole basement downstairs, then we had like chairs that were falling apart in the church. Well, St. Joe's gave St. James benches. When they put the benches in, they were too low. So they would go down there at night and put them like on blocks, of wood to make it high enough. So I had a good relationship with St. James. My grandmother was she took care of the little kids choir. Now I was bad. I'm gonna be honest with you. My grandmother never beat me. Never. My grandfather would, but my grandmother would say, "Well, I'm going to send you to your godmother's," which was Anna Conway, and I'd go up to her house and she'd fix me a cup of tea, and then she'd tell me, you're not supposed to, and here come the tears. But the lady that meant the most to me was a lady named Sally Peterson. She lived next to the school that was over on Magnolia. She lived across the street from the school. And she was my Sunday school teacher. And I didn't want her to know that I did anything bad. So when my grandmother would send me there, I said, oh my God, my grandmother wouldn't even have to tell her what I did. Just tell me to go there. And the tears would come. So those are the type of people that really helped me out a lot. My grandfather was a big influence in my life because he said that if you don't work, you'll steal. So I've always had a job. I had a white godfather named Thomas Walker. He lived up next door to where you live, next to the I think that's Presbyterian Church, the church that you live at. You know that big yellow house?
Oh, that's Juliana's house.
Thomas Walker used to live there, and I would go there and cut his grass, clean the pool. His wife was from the University of Alabama. Well, the first time I went there to work, she said, come and get your lunch. I came up on the porch and sat. So she sat there, she said, Larry, where you at? I said, I'm on the porch. She said, no, you come on in. From Alabama? But Mr. Walker, and you guys remember Dr. Allmark? Dr. Allmark was a dentist here in town. He was right on 5 Points. Okay. Well, Allmark offered me more money to come and take care of his yard and stuff. Walker said, I'll pay you double. You ain't working for him. So what I did was I'd go work for him, but I wouldn't let Walker know. Yeah, so I had a good upbringing, you know, here in Beverly, and I think guys, you know, we had black policemen here in town. William Cunningham was like an uncle. Marco Larimore. Who was the other guy? Bobby Steed and Stonewall, Marvin. So those guys, they kept you straight, you know. And we had other guys like Mr. Stanley Jones, Mr. Norman Bailey, that if you did something on their block, they would whoop your behind. And then they'd go and tell your parents. And your dad, my grandfather, boy, you're not gonna be messing up my name, you know. So we had what these kids, I think, need today, you know. Sometimes, you know, we don't give them the structure that they need. Because right now we got babies having babies. So we just have to, sometimes it takes a little bit longer to get to them, but that's what we have to do. So that's basically, you know, Beverly helped to, it grounded me into the person that I was. I mean, I met some highly influential people. I got a chance to go to the White House. I've had breakfast with several congressmen and a couple of senators. And from a boy that rose from the bean fields, you know, to people listening to you, you know. So I thank God for that.
Now, you are giving back to Beverly now. We need to hear about that. Say it again.
Well, I was down at the park one day, Stonewall, Mark, and myself, and I saw these kids in the park, and they were saying that the city won't let us do this and the city won't let us do that. So I said to them, I said, did you do it the right way? Well, what is the right way? I said, you got to go and you got to get permits and, you know, insurance and stuff. No, that's what you need to do. So as we were there, Stonewall and I got to talking about the old guys. And I said, you know, we're sitting on all of this history. Excuse me. And if we don't tell these kids, they'll never know. They'll just think that you're supposed to do what you do because you do it. So we started the Beverly Day in the park. And the first year we had maybe 250 people, and we gave away the food, people donated. And then the next year we did the same thing and grew. Then the Haaf Foundation came in and backed us. And now I'm expecting at least 400 people at the next one. But we honor those who went before us. Like now, we honor those who are 75 and above. Those are our living legends. And this year, we're starting something new. This year, we're going to honor those that we lost. So we don't want them to be forgotten. We have, I think, 22 people that we're honoring that are 75 and above, and we have like 23 that have passed on. So that's my way of giving back, you know, to the city. Now I stepped down this year, and Reverend Lawrence Foreman took over, but I still work with him, you know, and that's what it's about. Train up a child while he's young, and when he's old, he won't depart. So we do our job, and we train them, and then we let them do it. Now, I might whisper in his ear that, you know, you should do it this way, you should do it that way, but the decision is his. You're never there to embarrass anyone. So, you know, that's what we do now. When I go down in the park, I mean, I don't care who it is, I'm gonna go talk to them. Because sometimes they look at us like we don't care. But I want you to know that I love you regardless of who you are. So I thank you, Beverly, for allowing me to do that. And I thank you for allowing me to come to you tonight and share what little bit I had, even though I'm not totally from Beverly, but I've spent the majority of my life in the neighborhood.
Well,
And the date this year,
September 7th,
yes.
from 12 till 6.
All right.
We have entertainment and we have a DJ.
All right. Well, we want to end on a question that we ask every person who comes in to talk at the Living Library, which is, do you have any words of advice for the kids of today? People in, high school and below who need to really lock into this wisdom that we have right now with us.
The one thing that I would say is that we need to sometimes contact them.
Okay.
Because as kids are raising kids, some kids they've never had parents or mothers. Like when I came up, I didn't have my parents or mothers, but I had somebody else that thought enough of me to reach out and say, hey, this is the way you do it. So we might have to do that sometime, and don't give up. They may turn you down, but believe me, if you keep whispering in their ear, they're going to get that message loud and clear. So that's what I would say. And as I said, I thank you for allowing me to come and to be here. And I'm very happy that you thought enough of me to give me an opportunity to come.
well, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
A great story to tell. I got another question to ask.
Yes, sir.
When you were picking potatoes,
Mm-hmm.
did you ever pick potatoes near a little village in Mercer County called Dutch Neck?
Now, it was always in Freehold.
It was always in Freehold, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
What we would do, we'd come up to North Carolina, and then we go to Virginia, come on up to New Jersey or Shingle House, Pennsylvania, and then you'd head back to Florida. Now, some of those people worked all of those months and would go back home with $1.50. And they'd start the cycle all over again. When I worked in the bean fields, I never picked more than 5 hampers. People were picking 15 and 20. I was sorry. So I had to get out of that,
Well, thank you very much, Larry, for joining us today. This concludes our segment for the Living Library this month. Going into September, we're going to be going through our backlog and uploading everything onto our podcast channel on Spotify. So if you missed a week that you really wish you didn't, then it'll be up there. But aside from that, we're going to end tonight, so thank you once again very much.
Thank you very much.